Hello once again, friends and lovers. Welcome back to Best Concordia, your fave ethnography podcast on the interwebs. The only ethnography podcast, possibly. Definitely the best podcast. Yes. And I'm your host, Johnny B, coming to you live once again from the Ethnography Lab here at Concordia University in Montreal, Canada, alongside my muse and co-host, Anne-Marie Turcotte. Hi, Anne-Marie.
Hi, John.
Playing us in this week is music from our incredible guests, Couteau Papillon, and that song was Springtime off their EP Noir Corridor. And this week, in our Season 2 finale, we are bringing you two stories about the transformation of land, place, and space in rural and urban spaces, economic and cultural spaces, and how this impacts the stories we tell. Coming up a little later in the show, we will be catching up with Season 1 guest, PhD student Marie-Ève Drouin Gagné, to hear about her summer working with the Cabot Square Photovoice Collective here in Montreal. But first, we have been so lucky this season to have expanded our Best Concordia team with some really phenomenal talent, really phenomenal. And aside from all of their instrumental support in getting this podcast off the ground, they are also brilliant emerging researchers in their own right.
Yes.
Juan Pablo Neri came to us from the University of Mexico, and he is here at Concordia as a visiting scholar. Juan Pablo is an anthropology master's student, and he was gracious enough to get in front of the mic to tell us all about his research looking at the dynamics of quinoa production in Bolivia.
I'm from Bolivia.
Yes.
But I went to Mexico to study my master's degree in anthropology. I lived there for 1 year and a half because for 6 months I made my fieldwork research in Bolivia.
Okay.
And then this scholarship to come here and finish the writing of my thesis, and here I am.
Amazing.
I feel like very lucky because all of my colleagues are looking for work and seeing how they are going to finance themselves to end their thesis. But
yes, which we will talk about, because the financial side of trying to fund these projects is really can be really difficult. But what was your master's thesis about that you were doing your fieldwork in Bolivia for?
Well, my master's thesis is about peasants that produce quinoa in Bolivia, in the southern highlands of Bolivia. Why I decided to work with this topic is because quinoa has become a very super-rated food all over the world, especially in Canada. You know, and there is actually a lot of Bolivian producers that export to Canada. Mm-hmm. So,
is it one of the top places that consume?
Yes. North America, Canada, and United States. Sorry, Canada and Europe. But now there is more than 90 countries that are producing quinoa all over the world. So before I went to do my research, there was like a boom, of quinoa. And so the prices went high, and all the people there started making a lot of money. Of course, with difference, because there are a lot of difference among peasants. And now that there's the crisis going on, so a lot of people is leaving the countryside, is going to find some other activities. And the ones that are staying in their communities have to face this new phase of this new cycle of crisis and see what they're going to do. And so basically what I went to register is what are the dynamics nowadays with the crisis
and for the people who are working on these farms that are producing quinoa.
Yes.
So when you talk about the crisis, is there a particular political situation that's happening that's this crisis that you're alluding to?
Oh, no, actually, no. It doesn't have to do with politics, or it's just mainly economical. Yeah, okay. I mean,
gotcha.
It's something that has happened a lot with other commodities throughout history, of global capitalism.
Right.
And something that is very interesting is that there's always been commodities from Latin America that have been really important for the development of global economy, like cacao, sugar, coffee.
Yes.
And it's always the same story. It's always a cycle of boom and then a cycle of crisis. And the most affected populations are those who were the primary producers of these commodities. And so quinoa is like one of another commodity change that has emerged throughout this history of commodity chains from Latin America. Yeah.
So is is quinoa like sort of like a staple of, like, is it that it's being exported from the country, but then there's nothing left because the demands from, mostly Western nations, it sounds like, are like sort of like they're depleting the quinoa in Bolivia. Is that fair to say?
I mean, there's been a lot of transformations throughout this, because it's a long process, actually. It's not like the boom was between 2008 and 2013, where there was like this peak of prices.
Right.
But this process started in the mid-70s, actually, when a lot of universities from the United States went to Bolivia to make some research about quinoa, because they already knew that it was a superfood, and they wanted to see if they could produce it in Colorado first, and then in other places. And so it's a very long process where the market starts to interesting itself in quinoa, no? And so in the 70s and actually by the mid 80s and 90s, the production scheme was totally different.
Right.
All these communities were mostly shepherds, growing llamas. No. That was like the primary, the principal, the main
product.
Product.
Yes.
And it was not entirely for export. It was really shepherdy, and they had these commercial networks that were really not entirely included in the capitalist global network.
Right.
It was like very local
networks of people selling to each other, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and so quinoa was actually cultivated in the tops of the mountains, because that's where the wind is less strong, and these are very cold regions. So that was a way to protect your food, because quinoa was mainly to local consumer.
Right. So hence Colorado makes sense then to me, because it's similar, right?
Yes, actually. And so all the rest of the land, like the plain lands, were for the animals, for the livestock,
Right.
And so when the quinoa, when quinoa started to becoming a commercial crop, a cash crop, they started producing in the plains, and they started replacing the livestock for quinoa.
And these were still peasant farmers that were farming quinoa, but now in the plains.
Yes.
Okay.
And so now, if you go to the southern highlands of Bolivia, there's practically no livestock, and there's only quinoa. So it became like a I don't know how you say,
like a single commodity, sort of.
Exactly. Yeah, that's it. And so that's what happened. But also another thing that happened is that there were always like these migrations to the city, And when the quinoa boom started taking place, a lot of families that left the countryside for 40 years, 30 years, started coming back and claim lands so they could produce quinoa too. And that started, actually led to a lot of conflicts among the peasants, a lot of fights between families, and that's still taking place nowadays. But with the crisis, it's less and less the conflicts are less and less important. But there were a lot of transformations in that sense. And regarding your question, yes, people started exporting a lot, almost all the production. Yeah. And basically now what they are eating is pasta and rice, which is like the less expensive food that you can get in the market.
Right. Not superfoods.
Not superfoods, really common foods.
Yeah.
And quinoa, it's almost all the quinoa is exported. So
wow.
that's a problem even for health.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of health issues in the countryside.
Because people are eating a different diet than what they used to eat.
Yes.
And so were there commercial farms set up too? Like were there sort of like, were people able to like hold on to their farms, their farmlands? You're saying that there were people sort of like influxes of people between the countryside and urban centers, but were there sort of like corporate interests trying to move in and take land to farm, or did that happen?
No, actually that's the interesting thing about my research, that it's not like in other places where when there is a cash crop that emerges, a lot of corporate interests come to the area. Here is mostly the local people that have become entrepreneurs, if you say, and they are like the protagonists of this transformation.
Right.
So actually, one of the things that I discuss is that in order to understand this process of capitalization of the quinoa production, it's not only about that the foreign market that is determining their lives and all that stuff. It's also a local articulation from the people to the market. I mean, they want to be capitalist producers of quinoa. They want this. They enjoy these big transformations. There was a lot of changes in their lifestyles. I mean, a lot of people enhanced their homes. They bought themselves cars, tractors.
Right.
I mean, it was in a way it was something good because it really improved their life conditions.
Yeah.
But in the long term, it's really difficult because, first of all, it's a very fragile soil. It's like it's not even what you would consider a soil, because it's not even dark.
Kind of like sand?
It's kind of like sand, actually. It's kind of like beach sand.
Yeah.
And that's where quinoa grows. But the problem is that quinoa is a very strong crop. It's a very strong plant, and so it sucks all the nutrients from the soil.
Right.
And that's a major problem nowadays, because people started producing so much, and there is actually a lot of places that are going through the certification processes, and that is something that maybe will be irreversible in some cases.
And so the soil won't be able to be brought back, like
yes,
sort of in that sense.
And regarding the land tenure, there were conflicts. There were a lot of conflicts, but it's because before there was this big transformation, there was only private property in the mountains where they used to cultivate quinoa first, and the rest was common land for the livestock. And so when the quinoa started gaining a commercial value, people practically started to take land in a very arbitrary way. I mean, the neighbors that had more influence and more money could take more land than the little peasant,
Right.
And so now there is a lot of inequality in that matter. I mean, there are huge producers and there are very little producers. And the problem is that from the outside, most of the people think that it's all the same, they're all in the same conditions, And when you go inside there's actually people that have a lot of money, not only because they produce quinoa, but because they could invest in other businesses throughout these years, And so they started making even more money. And there are the little peasants that their livelihood is basically producing agriculture.
Like on a very small scale, though.
Yes.
Left out in the corner,
see things sort of going for the situation in Bolivia. And then also this, I think it's really fascinating, this idea that like we get fed a narrative about what it means to farm quinoa in Bolivia when the internal dynamics of that community are maybe not what, us in the north or whatever are being sold. I think that's fascinating. So like, that's the gap that you're filling.
Yeah.
So, and where do you see sort of like this, the things moving in terms of like quinoa producers in Bolivia?
Well, there are many aspects. First of all, there is going to be still a lot of quinoa production.
Yeah.
Maybe most of the peasants will understand that they have to at least try to produce organic in order to make better prices. You know? But on the other hand, there is the environmental issue that I mentioned
before.
The
soil.
Yes.
Yeah.
So a lot of the most of the communities are having these actual crises. For example, the year I went to do my fieldwork research, the whole year there was no rain, so they couldn't actually start the production because it didn't rain.
Wow.
And so that's a major problem, and that's going to be more and more recurrent in this area, because it's actually historically it's a very dry area, very cold and dry area, and these issues have become more important now because of climate change, because of intensification of the production, and so this is one major aspect that must be considered in order to think what's going to happen in the future. On the other hand, regarding these narratives of quinoa production and all, I think that that's not done yet. I think that maybe it's going to become more and more important. Because it's going to become more and more useful for the producers when they realize that that's actually one major feature that will allow them to sell more.
Absolutely.
I mean, you can buy quinoa from Spain, or you can buy quinoa from me, that I am an indigenous person. I produce organic. That can, and because people realize that. Actually, a very funny anecdote. When I was there at the meeting, and there was one of the producer associations representatives in the meeting, and so he was showing to the producers like the brand, the image, and it was like a very minimal art, made by it was a Colombian graphic designer, and it was like the form of the plant, of the quinoa plant, but in a very geometrical way, and then the colors of the indigenous flag, the huipala, and it was like in a white
background,
in a white background, and it was like the form, and it's a royal quinoa of southern Altiplano, something like that, very minimal,
right.
And so the people were like, they didn't understand that much. And so the guy that was presenting the brand kind of understood that and said, I know that you would like to have, I don't know, a mountain, like a little llama there, but that's not for...
Like the Juan Valdez Bolivian quinoa or something.
I mean, he understood the difference in these aesthetics, And so he said, I know you would like something different, but this is not for us. This is for the gringo, he said, This is for the gringo, and he must see this, and he must like this, And that's how you know. So there is this very pragmatic view from the peasants that they understand that all these things work,
totally.
how they work.
It's marketing.
Yes, and so
they know their audience.
Yes, and so they also understand that if you want to sell more quinoa, you need to say that it's an indigenous product, it's a traditional product, and all this stuff. So actually, when I introduced myself to one of the associations, when I was starting my fieldwork, he said to me, "Oh, you're an anthropologist. Oh, that's good because now we're working on this brand, and maybe you can help us to add the anthropological, perspective to this brand, you know." And so he actually knew that usually anthropologists work with traditional knowledge and stuff. So he understood that maybe that's what I was doing there, you know.
That's
so they are very pragmatic, and I think that's one of the main topics that I want to highlight in my thesis. That it's not that the market comes to them and it changes their life. It's also dynamics that come from below. You know, it's the local people that can articulate themselves to capitalism. Yes.
Wow. That's super fascinating work. That's amazing. And so then, you did your field work. What was the reception for you when you were doing your field work?
Interesting, because, you know, the first time I tried to do research, field work research, you know, was when I was finishing my
your undergraduate degree.
And so I was working with indigenous autonomies in Bolivia, and so I went to it's the same region, the highlands, but I went to the northern highlands. And there the people they're more proud with their indigenous background, and so for me it was very difficult because they always demanded me to speak in their language. I didn't know the language, so I was like, okay, it's gonna be tough. And they were really, really like very distant people, very close people. And so when I went to Bolivia this time, I was like, maybe this is the highlands, so maybe I'm gonna have the same problems. But actually, first because most of the people are people that have come back from the city,
Right.
So most of the people speak Spanish, and most of the people know that if you speak Spanish, it's better for the business because, a lot of people is going to come, and researchers, because I wasn't the first researcher, they told me, last month there was a German girl who was doing the thesis, her thesis on quinoa too, He just left, and the year before there was a French guy. So they are really used to have a lot of people there, and so they are actually, they have become very open people. And so, for example, when I got there, I was thinking, I have to find somewhere to live, someplace to live. And the person that was going to help me was very busy because he was the president of this association, and so he was working on the brand and all the stuff. And he told me, at the end of the day, I'm going to help you to search in one of the houses of the people around here if you can rent a place. And so that afternoon I was at the main square, of the town. I didn't know what to do because it was actually, there was nobody, around. It was like really, really...
you were just there by yourself?
Yeah.
Nobody around?
I was smoking a cigarette like, I'm going to go back to my hotel room. And so I saw a local authority. You can recognize them because they use like some special...
clothes.
Outfit. They've got like an outfit,
Right.
And so when I saw him, I said, well, maybe I should go and talk to him. But he was the one who came to me and told me, "Oh, hi, how are you? Are you lost? Do you need tourist guidance, something like that?" And I was like, "No, I'm actually looking for somewhere to live." And say, "Oh, but at the community house, we have rooms that you can rent."
Hey.
And so I went there.
Wow, they found you.
Yeah,
you didn't even have to find them.
Yeah, that was really cool. And actually, they gave me it was not a bed, but it was like a mattress.
A mattress.
Yeah, a mattress. And then they actually equipped me. It was really cool, the first weeks.
Wow.
It was the authorities, the local authorities' wife that would give me my breakfast every morning, That was really, really cool, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you fit right in.
Yes.
They embraced you wholeheartedly.
They embraced me. Actually, it was really cute because they always had these meetings in other communities. You can only go there by car because very away in
like a remote kind of thing.
Yeah. And so they always take me with them, in their car. And sometimes they even introduce me as their son, So, this is an anthropologist's son that we just adopted, And so, I didn't have problems there.
So no troubles doing your field work.
And actually, I also made my part of my field work in another really remote community that's called Rodeo, and it's literally 30 houses in the middle of nowhere, and most of the people don't live there anymore, only the elder people.
Right.
And so I was living in one of these elder people's house, they gave me a room, actually, and the old lady will every day cook for me, So it was really good, and that was another experience because that place was really, really remote,
Yeah.
Sometimes you even had a phone signal,
Right.
And at the end of the day, because it's really cold, from 6 p.m., it's really, really cold. So everybody goes into their houses.
Right, it's too cold to be outside.
Yeah, and there's nothing outside, and I had to go to the bathroom that was really far away from where I was sleeping.
Like an outhouse kind of thing?
So, no, it was actually an external bathroom,
Oh, okay, yeah.
So I had to go there in the middle of the night, with my lantern, I had a really good experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing that you were so welcomed in by the community. That's really cool.
Yeah.
And then, so now you've done your field work. You were in Mexico. How did you get to Concordia?
Well, it was there is this thing called the Emerging Leaders in the Americas program.
Okay.
It's scholarships that are given to Latin American students in order to finish their writings or doing some research.
Yep.
I'm actually not doing research here because I am done with my research.
Right, your field work is done. So you're just here writing and completing your studies.
And I thought it was a good opportunity. I'm going to be honest with you because actually my Mexican scholarship was finished in July.
Yep.
So I was kind of wondering, what am I going to do? I'm going to go back to Bolivia and finish my thesis there and then come back to Mexico to do the defense.
Yeah.
And this came out. I applied. And
amazing.
Yeah.
So you got some extra funding.
And I got to know Montreal.
And you get to come here and hang out. How long are you in Montreal for?
I'm already a month here.
Already a month. And until when?
Until January.
Until January. Okay, so just kind of a short
Yes.
visit.
But, well, I could have been more, more time, but I have to be back by January because I have to defend my thesis.
Yeah. And what were the criteria for this scholarship? Was there boxes you had to check?
Yeah, pretty
Did you have to
much.
Write something?
Yeah,
I'm just
no,
curious
I
about the
didn't have
process.
to write anything. I just had to send a letter of intent
Okay.
to the program, and then a letter of acceptance from somebody in the university, in this case Concordia.
Right. And how did
sponsor?
a sponsor? But
Yeah.
and your sponsor here is Dr. Mark Watson.
Yeah.
And how did you meet him?
Well, because there was a seminar in Mexico.
Okay. And he was at the seminar.
Yes.
You met him there.
And he's really a really good friend with my
your supervisor.
My supervisor in Mexico. You know? So I just wrote to him, and he said yes, and that's it. Yeah.
Good for you, you know. Like I just like hearing about like students that are like enterprising in that way and like apply for shit. You know, like you just these.
Well, that's what you gotta do now in order to extend your
to get
student
funding,
life
to get paid
before you
for
need
it.
to before you need to
network, because now you can look at Montreal as an eventual place where you can do your PhD.
Right? Yeah, that's actually part of my mission here.
Yeah, you're looking for a supervisor in a good university.
Yes.
So
and
great.
I really like the ambience
in Montreal.
Yeah. And here, I think that if I come here to make my PhD, I would definitely be part of this podcast team. You know,
absolutely.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely, you should come in.
But you know, when you stay like 6 months, you don't have time to get a real culture shock. You kind of still like people for being different,
right.
And then at one point, after you just hate everybody.
Maybe not everybody has that experience.
A culture shock, but it takes a while.
Do you think? You would just love Montreal forever.
You think? I don't know.
But
I think
you think it's unavoidable that these things happen?
Well, at one point, like every code is different, everything's different, and you get to a point, but it takes a while.
Right.
But it doesn't stay forever.
So like 4 months is like all honeymoon period.
I would say it takes a year.
Yeah,
after a year, you're just like,
even applies to relationships, but that's another thing.
Yes. This is probably true.
Maybe I'm having But
that's a good one.
I like it here.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, for example, I live with a really Quebecois roommate.
Mm-hmm.
He's really cool. And
how did you get hooked up with him?
Oh, because after this seminar, there was another international congress in Mexico, and there was I met there a guy from here.
Oh, okay.
And he introduced me to his friends via Facebook. You know.
Yeah.
And that's how I got to meet with my present roommate.
Yeah. Amazing. So you're a good networker.
Yeah, I think so.
I think you are, because
I've got
came to the first.
I think that is more that I am lucky with people, you know.
Well, yeah, but you put yourself out there because you also came to the first meeting for the Ethnography Lab.
Yes,
and then you met us, and you see that there's opportunities out there, and you're not afraid to like take advantage of those. I think that's really great.
That was Noir Corridor by Montreal-based band Couteau Papillon, our fabulous musical guest this week. Le groupe s'est formé de Philippe Lachance, Linda Luttinger, Sarah Breitkreitz, Pierre-Marc Lemire, and Gabriel Frank. Their latest EP, Noir Corridor, is available for purchase on their Bandcamp page and also comes with conceptual artwork for each song created by vocalist Linda Luttinger. And I have to say, the illustrations are really stunning, so make sure you go and check them out and get your copy of the EP. Merci beaucoup à la gang de Couteau Papillon. Nous sommes très reconnaissants d'avoir la chance de partager votre musique cette semaine. And if you didn't catch that, our dear friend Sarah Breitkreitz is part of Couteau Papillon, and Sarah appeared on the podcast last season alongside fellow PhD student Marie-Ève Drouin Gagné to talk about the Cabot Square Photovoice Collective, one of the working groups here in the Ethnography Lab. And although this week Sarah's presence is with us through song, Marie-Ève is back in person to talk to us about the work the collective did over the summer in Cabot Square in Montreal using Photovoice, a visual participatory method. And the last time we spoke, the collective was planning on using the theme Montreal as an indigenous place as a prompt for the photos, but as Marie-Ève explained to me, the prompt had evolved since then.
So this is how it goes. Like usually you have a prompt and then people go and take pictures and they narrate it. They take it however they want. And sometimes it's a very like punctual thing. Like it can be also in a case there was a project and it was about safety on campus for women. I can't remember where. But anyway, and the idea was like just take pictures of what feels safe and what feels unsafe. So it can be a very like punctual thing. Ours was super general. So we, as a group, first thought about how is Montreal an indigenous place. That was kind of our prompt. Already very large, very broad.
Yeah.
But then part of our project was also we had a 2-day workshop before we even began going to the square. We had a 2-day workshop. The idea was to train indigenous students and community members in Photovoice methodology for them to learn about it, and then they can use it in their own projects and everything. And anyway, we had a budget for that. It was really great. We were able to pay them to come and learn. So like at once also like you're not paying for learning for a workshop, but it's like you're paid to come and learn the methodology.
How many people did you have in the workshop?
We had 7 students and community members and one elder who participated with us too.
Fantastic. Was that fun?
Yeah, it was awesome. It was really cool. And part of it for us was also to talk about our project with a different with different people, because so we were all like grad students, non-native. We needed to have like feedback from other people too. So to invite them, like on one hand, we're giving them a training, and they can stop at that point and say, I've learned and it's great, and that's it. Yeah. But we also invited all of them to be co-researchers if they wanted on the project. And so that happened. But also during the 2 days, we did the photo voice process. We also went to the Cabot Square with them, and they took pictures, and and that unifying collective one came out of that specific 2 days.
And so you were saying the prompt? So the prompt,
changed. So it was also a way for us to have a conversation about our project with them and have them really input. Like we had like a first kind of advisory committee with the partners when we had a meeting with them, and they changed our project basically, right? and then they came in, and it was kind of a second kind of consultation for us to like say, is that okay, or how could we? And one of the discussion we had was about our prompt that for lots of people didn't make sense. The participants in the workshop were like, what does that even mean? And then we realized that saying like Montreal as an indigenous place was raising the questions of indigeneity and identity, and that was not necessarily where we were going with it. Right. And for some people, some of the participants were like, this is not like, what does that mean? What is an indigenous place anyways? And some people even said like, Montreal is not, like for us, it's more like the colonial space. So anyway, there were like many layers, and we were like, oh, okay. Like we didn't realize that we were putting our own, understanding into this prompt. So it was good to have them like their feedback. So we basically said, so what prompt should we ask? Like what prompt would be good to be asked in that context? And they came with like a super basic yet super general one. It was, are there stories you want to tell about this place? So that's basically like the prompt we went with in the square. We were addressing ourselves to the indigenous users of the square in a certain setting of like every Friday afternoon Aboriginal programming. So there was a certain framing of that. What are it's not a question that you ask like in the void. Right, there was like a very context, in a certain way. Yeah. Partly also by our kiosk. We also had a kiosk. That's something else that I can talk about. But so that's the question we were asking people. Like, are there stories that you want to tell about this place? Yeah. And this particular poster that I've been talking about just happened because we were in the square and there were that organization. And it was, if I remember well, it was like a Christian and Muslim organization trying to like bridge them, and they were coming in the square and they brought food for users of the square, some of them who are homeless. And anyway, so they were working at that, and so one of the participants took that picture of them looking away, and that was the story that they wanted to tell about this place, like how people come also here to help and support and gather and across different identities, I guess. Yeah. So
very cool.
Yeah.
The secrets man, blazing fire keep coming to the air and sea. Hurry up while the sun don't shine. Before the streets turns you blind.
And it was great, like, to be honest, the whole process, also just being there every afternoon from that point on, it was also like a community building a little bit, like getting to know people who are in the square and stuff like that. Yeah. And then after that, we were there every Friday afternoon with our kiosk and with a camera and with a printer so that we could print right away the pictures. that people would take. We would give them a copy of their picture, and they could like put it in the. So I have an example here. Of course, people can't see it, but so we would like we had a little notebook where we would put like the picture, and then the person could write their narrative. Yeah, that would go with the picture. Again, like it really.
So you have a whole bunch of pictures in this notebook. I
have a few of them. So we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
they look really
6, and 7. So we had a total of 7 people who participated. We were there 7 Friday afternoon, and we had 7 participations that happened.
Is it just one camera?
Yeah, we had only one camera. We at first we were shooting for having 2 cameras always, but it didn't turn that way, and it was fine. We were expecting a bit more participation than that. There were a number of reasons why that didn't happen. Part of it is, and we just had a meeting, like an assessment meeting last Friday with the whole group, or those who could attend, to like see how things went and everything. One of the things that I heard that I think it's true, so we had to modify the Photovoice methodology in order to make it like a drop-in session every Friday afternoon. But then we talked, and the thing is, like, for Photovoice to happen also, you have to hold a certain space and a certain time for people to get, comfortable to tell their stories in a way and everything.
Right.
So maybe the drop-in session was not necessarily the best way of creating
because people are just coming in maybe randomly on a Friday, and maybe they're not feeling quite like they're ready to take a picture.
So a lot of people talked to us, told us stories, and then we were like, well, it would be great if you wanted to like take a picture, but some people were like, not too sure. So there wasn't like as many people who were into it. Well, I mean, I think people were into it, but like from being interested and wanting to tell their story to actually take the step of doing it, it was like another level of like committing that I guess not everyone was like super keen to. So that's something to be learned, like if ever we would do it again. I think we would have to maybe think about the workshop really worked well. Like the feedback we got from the students and the community members who came, and they were like, because it was 2-day, we had an elder with us. There were many layers that made it like a safe space to tell their stories and to do what they wanted to do, which like a Friday afternoon is a bit maybe a rush to do that. Right. Our way of thinking was like, we thought the consistency of showing up every Friday afternoon with time would create that kind of relationship where people maybe would be like, okay, I've seen you guys, I know what you're doing, maybe now I'm ready, but
were you seeing a lot of the same people over and over again?
Yeah. It was most of the time the same crew. There's other like factors that chip into it. Like we had to cut short a couple of Friday afternoon because of the rain, because we had such a beautiful July month.
Right.
That a couple of times like we had to wrap up everything and just leave because it was raining. So that cut short our the kiosk and everything. So that explains a little bit because we were shooting for 2 people per afternoon. So we thought we would have like a total of like maybe 14 participants. It ends up 7. So it's like half of what we were shooting for, but it's okay. Like I think it's totally fine. But the quality of the stories we got is another layer too. And I can talk some more about that, but, so there's the rain. There's also one thing, and I'm happy we have that narrative also in the outcome, like the banners that we printed at the end. One of the story that was told is the interruption by the police, and there was a heavy policing of the square
throughout. The whole time you were there. And
I mean, sometimes less, but there was one afternoon, especially that they really disrupt what was happening. They began like giving fine to people.
And what was happening in the square?
So there were, people just like some people were consuming maybe. That was like not where we were standing. It was a bit further. I can't even say that they were or not, but the police were definitely there and like talking to them, and I saw them writing a fine to them. there's that. But where we were having our kiosk, and there was a stone carving, Inuit stone carving happening at the same time of our kiosk, just on the side of where we were. And there was also hoop dancing that day. And towards the end, we were doing a round dance. And just by where we were, there was like a bench, and there was a guy who was laying there. And he was even told by someone, like, oh, you should just lay down for a while and you'll feel better or whatever. And the police decided that this is not acceptable. They can't be sleeping on the bench.
Wow.
So there was 6. There were a bike patrol, whatever you call them.
Oh, they were like police officers on bikes or whatever.
Yeah. But they're like a group of them. So there were 6 of them.
Okay.
The square is not that big, and so like. Anyway, having 6 of them already just like patrolling the square was very heavy the whole afternoon. But when they decided like to target that guy and come, they really interrupted like the round dance that we were having. Like they were really just disturbing everyone and everyone's activity. Yeah. So that was pretty heavy.
I hope nothing. And like nobody got violent.
No, nothing. But we were all like a little bit. So what's our role? What should we do? Like, what do you do when you see something like that happen? One of the things was like, well, we're gonna be at least like we're gonna remain here and like look what's happening and check that everything is they don't have the right to search their things, for example. Right. That's there's no reason for that. Yeah. So there was us, but there were also like people from the city, even like that from the l'arrondissement that were working for the stone carving that was happening. So lots of people got involved and were like, what's happening here? Why are you guys doing this anyways? And anyway, so there was like a kind of altercation also between the police and the people who were occupying the space and saying like, you guys are the ones, you said that he's disturbing, but he's not. He's just laying down. You are disturbing what's happening in here. You're like... Anyway, so so someone that was at the square that day took a picture of that and wrote a caption of that. So one of our final poster tells that story.
What was the caption?
The caption says, and I should have a picture of it, but it was bilingual. It was both in French and English, and it said something like the strategy, the SPVM bike squad strategy, 6 against 1, something like that. And you could see them, the police and their bikes, and you could see like the guy there. Wow! And so that's one story that was important to be told and powerful. And also, like on the side of that, I actually made I wanted to make like an official complaint. This is not okay. But that's another long story. But yeah, so anyway.
Did you wind up doing that?
What?
Long story short, did you wind up doing that?
I tried, but they sent me from one, poste de police to another, and like it's not
an easy process.
But the person who took that picture anyway knew some people, and she said if you want to write an official letter to the arrondissement and the city, I'll make sure it gets there. So that's what I did. What was really interesting though, it's les camps jours, how do you say that? Day camp of the city came to the square a lot on Friday afternoons for the Aboriginal culture. So there was lots of kids learning how to carve stones and hoop dance, and it was really cool. And one of our posters talk about that. And it's the woman who was teaching the kids and everyone in the square who, like, I learned a little bit how to hoop dance. And what she wrote is, I have it here, that she said something about how, like, children are her favorite audience. Yeah. So it was great also to see, that kind of dynamic of positive contributions of Indigenous peoples to the square, and them being in the role of also teaching and transmitting something to children, non-Indigenous children. So,
what I really find funny is that it's over-policed as if Indigenous people were dangerous, and then they need to be watched constantly, but then day camps and children go there because they learn a lot. So the reality is children are not scared of going there and have fun, but the police over-police this particular spot. So
and that's really that is exactly what I said, like in the letter that I wrote, the complaint. I was saying how, this is an effort to me. What I saw was like how it's an effort to bridge different communities. And it's very interesting what's happening there. Like the children are there from the camps, and then you have workers from the city. You have also users of the square who, like, some of them are homeless people who are there and everything, but they would like also dance the hoop dance. So you had like all of these things happening, and to me it was like how you create that really gathering space where different people from across like come together in a moment, and a teachable moment and a learning moment. And then but you're policing it, and to me it's clearly racial profiling, because I've been in many squares throughout the summer with different activities that are happening there, and you don't see them being as heavily policed. And I'm like, you're there just because this is like Aboriginal programming, or because of the nature of the square and the population who is there, which is lots of Inuit and other indigenous peoples who hanged out. But I was like, why are you checking from, this particular cultural event? There's other cultural events all over the city, but this one is an Aboriginal one, and you're policing it pretty heavily.
It speaks a lot also to the exclusion of homeless people, as like if homeless people were dangerous because they are outside of the norm. So therefore they must be dangerous. But on the contrary, we see that in that particular space, homeless people participate in the activities with the children and with everybody, and they're not dangerous.
And I mean, like, to be honest, like, we also faced, and that's like one thing that we said in the assessment meeting, like, there was one of the co-researchers brought it. She was like, there's also an elephant in the room in terms of like drinking in the square that is happening, and like, do we address that or not, or what? But like, even like, I saw that a little bit, like, sometimes like you would have during the singing or the dancing, you would have someone that is clearly in another stage,
right.
But they're having fun, and I'm like, so what, in a sense?
So what? Absolutely.
If something happens, of course, but there are outreach workers in the square, where there's the Roundhouse Coffee. There's also like part of it is an office for an outreach worker. So there are people there that are there to help, and if ever something would happen. So to me, it's like we really don't need that heavy policing, and it's not. And what we were told by the police was like, oh well, someone must have like filed a complaint. So like the neighborhood people, with gentrification, that's another layer that brings in like people who complain about, oh, there's like people drinking in the park. Anyway,
well, and you see who escalates the situation is not the person sleeping on a bench, but the 6 people trying to get them to stop sleeping on the bench. So But I what I'm hearing a lot too, which is like so amazing and wonderful, is like that the sort of the community building, like that was happening while you guys were in the square. Like that's really
cool. Like one of my friends told me, he was like seeing, because I would post pictures on Facebook every time, and he was like, oh, well, anyway, your project is just like you go and you chill in the park. And I was like, yes, and that's like the really fun part of it. Of course, there's a lot of work like behind that before you get to this point.
Of course.
But I was like, yes, it's part of it is that, like being there with the people, and, just, and I think that the consistency. What was super interesting also is like how many people who just, cross the park, come and go, who of course stopped because of the different activities that were going on, like stone carvings or the hoop dance or different things, like, people would notice it and be like, oh, what's happening here? But also lots of people came to our kiosk and just like, what is that? And then just to learn about the history of Montreal and the indigenous history of Montreal. So also felt like, okay, maybe we didn't have like as many participants as we were hoping in terms of the photo voice, but our project was really fulfilling like multiple kind of agendas and interests. And I think that just, raising awareness with our kiosk was one of the things that I felt good about, at least. And, I think it was a good contribution to the whole, taking the space as an indigenous space in the square. Yeah. Posters were really, I call them posters, but some people call them banners, whatever you want to call them. Some of the banners were talking really about the square as a gathering space. So some of them were about making music in the park, because there's also a piano, those public piano.
Oh, yeah.
There was one, it was I should have them all in front of me with the quotes. I'm sorry. But anyway, lots of them talked about just the space as a gathering space, both in terms of relationships that are created in the square between friends and between collectives, unifying collectives, all these things. But also in terms of a political space, because one of them was a picture of the bottom part of the statue, and the quote or the caption was talking about how this is also a political place, for many demonstrations, manifestations that happen meet there, and will gather there before they walk. And also for the missing and murdered Indigenous women, it's a place to go. And just recently there were 2 Inuit women who died in Montreal and under suspicious circumstances, and there was a vigil in the square for them. So anyway, there was there were some pictures that were talking about just the square as a gathering space for Indigenous peoples, also for all kinds of people, but also as a political space. The gathering is not just neutral, it's also political in a way of claiming the space. So there was a series of them talking about that. There was also another series. Sorry, I'm searching for it. Oh, yeah. So there was a series of pictures that were talking about what I call mitigated impacts of the changes they did in the square. So, one was a picture of there's some really cute tables and chairs that go with the coffee, the roundhouse coffee in the square. Yeah. But they're only for customers only. And so there was a picture that was taken of these, and it was saying empty table with chairs. And when we talked with that person, what they meant with that was well, it's all cute and everything, but it's empty. No one was sitting when they took the pictures. No one was sitting at that moment. And it was a bit talking about you're recreating that space, you're renovating it, but then to serve whom? Yes. Right? So there was that, and then
nobody apparently.
Well, lots of people. I mean, I love the Roundhouse Coffee. By the way, I think it's the only place in Montreal that I think it's the only restaurant that serves indigenous food. You can go and have an Indian taco and stuff like that. It's meant to be that way, and it's in collaboration with the Itinéraire. So it's great, but it talks to how different people will do will come in the square and intervene on it and change things, but then what's the impact for people in there? Right. So one of the picture also, it was 2 pictures going together, and one was a picture of those new lamps that they put in the square, and it was saying good intentions don't always have the best impacts, or something like that. And then there was another picture, it was the sun through the tree canopy, kind of. And so it was kind of expressing the dichotomy between that kind of electric lightning versus the actual natural sun, because lots of discussions were about how this used to be a green space, and it's not anymore. It has some kind of white, it's not concrete, it's a weird I don't know what they put on the...
Some sort of stone.
Yeah,
something.
stones. Anyway, so it's not the same as it was. So that was kind of expressing this.
So that artificial...
Yeah, the kind of artificiality of it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot that goes behind that. It's also like how they created a space that it's much more open and much easier to surveil. Right? Yes. So there's no bushes where you can go and hide and do whatever you would do behind bushes.
Right.
So
whatever that might be.
Well, one incident that happened, one of the things that you might do behind the bushes is like pee if you don't have access to a toilet.
Yeah.
And one afternoon we were there, and there was a lady who we realized that one bench, which is totally open to everyone to see, kind of serves as a toilet for people who are there. And we kind of didn't understand the situation when that happened. Like, we were like, why is that person taking off their pants? Like, what's happening there? Like, we didn't understand. Yeah. And then we realized that that's what was happening, and really shocked us in many ways. And one of the co-researchers, that's one thing that really kind of stuck with them, because it's like, it's the basic right of peeing that you don't have. Because the square, so there's a toilet, anyway, there's some kind of toilets there, but you need a code to enter. And then you could go like in the l'Ancien Forum in front of it, like the Alexignon place or whatever. Right, but now security don't let anyone go in, because now they know who are the people who are like just hanging out in the square. So sometimes they don't let them in. Wow. So like just the basic right of like going to the bathroom is absent.
Been taken away. Yeah.
So that was like shocking to us too, and so you do all the reflection of the space and you don't put the toilet, and you take away like the bushes where you could like maybe hide behind to do like whatever you would do. Yeah. Anyway, that's just one thing, but it was an important theme, even like in the outcome of things. Another really important theme that came out was really the indigenous contributions to the square and to the city, and those I have with me. This more like, as I was talking about, like how the hoop dancing, how she, Barbara, like she taught people to hoop dance, and then she did a poster about that, and how her favorite audience is the children, and then like the people who were the star. What's that? I'm having a
soapstone carving.
Is that
what's going on in that picture?
Yeah. Thank you. I'm like, carving was the name that I was...
Carving, yes.
So the carving masters, as we call them, the Inuit men who were teaching people also like made their contribution, and they were talking about the positivity of it, and how they're teaching people because it's important, and how people told them that they should teach.
So in those pictures, it's like hands carving, and then somebody else's hands kind of in the shot too. I really like that.
And with like, you can see also the tools that you use to carve. So they're like in the motion of doing it. And then there was also one that was talking about the roots, the deep roots. It was a more general one, but it was talking about like the deep roots of indigenous peoples in the city, and also throughout the province, the different nations, and how these roots are still living and alive in spite of trying to annihilate indigenous nations. Yeah. And and then they were talking about like how in Montreal, we need to plant, or seeds are there for big Mohawk trees to be grown. It's in French, so I'm like kind of translated. So another interesting, I'm going to finish with the teams, but then I'm going to tell you another interesting fact about these posters and the languages that were used.
So that roots one, the picture that is associated with it is a picture of
it's a tree in the square that grows in the square. So there's not much bushes, but there's a couple of trees. So she took a picture only of the roots, and she says, I can read it in French. It says, les racines d'ici sont plus grandes que d'où je viens, mais ils ont vécu une tentative de mort d'enterrement oubliée. Mais la nature, plus forte que tout, survivra comme ma nation et les 10 autres au Québec. Et pour Montréal, plantons des graines de futurs grands arbres Mohawk.
Nice.
So there were like a few like posters that were talking like that about like the positivity and the contributions of indigenous peoples in the square in Montreal in general. And then another series was about the interruptions. So we talked about the police one. There was another one that was talking about like the kind of white entitlement that happened in the square.
Yeah.
When like one afternoon we were there was like there was always music, speakers with music, and it was Inuit throat singing that was happening. And there's like those white guys that just walked in the square, didn't like really pay attention to the activities that were going on, and they began like making like cloonish kind of gestures on the music, and they were like, I'm really into it, but they were like kind of kidding about it without really taking into account what is happening here.
Yeah.
So the person took like a picture of that and was talking about like how, it's like white entitlement, like people just walking in and feeling that this is their square and not realizing the use that other people are having of this square and what it means. And so that was like another series. It's actually two. It's that one and the police one. So different kinds of interruptions, right? And then like a last theme was the support that exists in the square. So part of it was like a hand, like it was two hands showing with a little ladybug on it, but it was saying a helping hand. So like just talking about how you can also find these kind of things in the square. And I think for me, it also talks about the network lists about 12 different organizations that are around the square or doing some work in the square with the different population there, either in terms of preventions, but also support. So to me, like these were really talking about that kind of things that exist in the square too. So it was really interesting to see, like, to me, it was like all of these different things that happen in the square, and it's not just one thing,
Yes,
there's
and lots
negative,
of different
there's
layers
positive,
of meaning in all of these images.
So
a really
amazing.
rich project, like a lot of really cool stuff came out of it.
If you'd like to hear a bit more detail about the Cabot Square Photovoice Collective and their experience in the field this summer, we will be posting Marie-Ève's interview in full, unedited, on our SoundCloud page, and it will also be available on iTunes. Big love to our guests this week, Marie-Ève Drouin Gagné, Juan Pablo Neri, and the insanely talented Couteau Papillon. Don't forget to go get yourself a copy of their EP Noir Corridor on their Bandcamp page. And oh my goodness, can you believe that this has been 6 episodes already? We hope that you enjoyed Season 2 of Best Concordia as much as we enjoyed sharing it with you. Big love to all of you. This season was produced by Pauline Hoebanx, Juan Pablo Neri, Alejandra Melian-Morse, Adam Van Sertima, and Marie Turcotte, and Papa Kris Millett.
Oh,
Congrats, Kris. Huge thanks to the Concordia Ethnography Lab, the Milieu Institute, and the Speculative Life Research Cluster for helping us make this season happen. We love you guys. Stay tuned for bonus content coming up in the new year, and until then, best Concordia.
Who's that John Pablo? It sounded it in.
The Joan Baez of the.
I believe she's turning down every discussion we have at the end, so we can't hear anything.
I know, she's a real bitch. Just kidding, Joan Pablo. We love you. We're gonna miss you so much when you go away. Go back. Don't leave us. Joan Pablo. Miss the abuse. The constant stream of abuse. Hey, there's a bitch. I did that. It's fine. You're like, no, it's good enough. Shut up. Here we are. Are you ready, Anna?
Yes.
We have to that's our love for Juan Pablo at the end. That's who we are like.
I know.
Oh, good.